Welcome to the SCAD Savannah Film Festival, the largest university-run film festival in the U.S. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Brittany Kaplan. I'm a senior editor from Entertainment Weekly. I'm here with Phillida Lloyd, who is Tony nominated, and Claire Dunn. Thank you again so much for being here, and to all of our friends, virtual friends watching, thank you. And let's get this conversation started. I have to say, I loved this film. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed watching it. I thought it was spectacular and also so powerful and so positive, which I think is such an interesting and amazing thing you did. It was so empowering. And I want to say something that maybe not everyone knows just from having just watched it, but Claire, you didn't just star in it, you wrote it. So what I want to ask is, where did this idea come from?
I was basically just doing some auditions in New York about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was enjoying my first experience of pilot season, basically reading a lot of scripts and just, you know, treading the streets every day, going to all those auditions. And in the middle of it all, a dear friend of mine rang me, and she's a single mother with three kids living in Dublin, and she was in a position where she had to leave her current accommodation. And there was nowhere to go. There was a housing crisis beginning to get worse in Dublin. And yeah, she had to go through the process of actually declaring herself homeless on a, you know, filling in a form. And the process was just so painful. And I just really felt for her at that moment. And I was standing there in New York, and I knew that I wasn't really where I wanted to be in my own life and career, and she certainly wasn't where she wanted to be. And I was sitting there fantasizing to myself about, imagine she could just bypass all the kind of systems at play, the kind of waiting on a house on a council housing list or applying for rent accommodation, and imagine she could just build a house for herself. And I Googled self-build Ireland, and then self-build Ireland cheap. And then I found that a guy called Dominic Stevens, this fantastic architect, he built a house for himself for only €25,000 back in like 2009. And then I knew that something like that could be done. So it just sparked off something in my imagination of just imagining this woman who is leaving a very dire situation and trying to find somewhere to go with her children, and what she would do to make that happen. So it's sort of about her deciding to help herself, and therefore a different and better kind of help arrives in her life, and therefore transforms her life.
And you've worked with Phillida, right? Correct, in theater. And how did this kind of beautiful marriage come together where you were working on the film together?
We were working in theatre together, and I ended up showing the script to Phillida kind of at some point on the journey, and it was like we were in conversation about it anyway, and Phillida wanted to help me out as a kind of mentor and an amazing guiding eye. And well, at first, Phillida, sorry, I should let you speak, but you were saying that originally you thought, oh, it should be an Irish director, right, and an independent one. And then, yeah, she wanted to do it herself, which more than delighted me.
I mean, we were working in an all-female company in New York when Claire maybe first showed me the screenplay, and I was just first of all like completely blown away by, this is her first screenplay, and what an incredible sort of instinct for the shape of a movie that she had, but also how this story, that it's a subject that has been tackled on film before, but somehow that she was tackling it in a very, very fresh, and though it was very harrowing, it was also, it had much light and dark that I hadn't sort of felt this around this subject before. And so I just thought, well, I'll give support, and maybe it should be directed by an Irish director. And then one day somebody came along and said, wow, they'd read the screenplay and said, you know, Claire's written a role, because at that point she wasn't thinking if the film was made, she was going to necessarily play Sandra in her typically humble way. And someone said she's written this incredible role for a really great movie actress. And I thought, yeah, herself. She's written it for her and she's going to play it. And that's how I just suddenly went from kind of 0 to 60 and went, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make that happen. And yeah, it's been a really an incredible journey.
So when, a lot of people know, of course, you've been doing these big blockbusters, these big films, you go to something that's more quiet. What does that take in your brain to kind of go from something that's so big to something that's just so beautiful and quiet and meaningful? Not that Mamma Mia is not. We all love that in our own way.
I just think in a way this is more the world that I have lived in for the last many, many years in the theatre. It's a more down to earth. We're very used to, in the theatre, working in an ensemble where everybody on not just the actors, but the crew feel invested, totally invested in the subject and that they have a stake in it. And so in some ways, I've been sort of looking for quite a few years to try to kind of marry the social missions that I'm working on in the theatre with work on screen. And this just completely kind of replied to that. So oddly, I feel probably much more at ease in this world, this low budget world. It kind of speaks to me and I feel comfortable in it.
Yeah. We talk about like the social missions and everything of it. And in watching it, something that I was so struck by is the difference. And I think a lot of people in other countries, certainly in America, will be very struck by the difference with how things are handled in Ireland than the US, because there is actually a system for people who don't have housing or who are searching for, who have left abusive relationships. There isn't really a system here or one that is working in any way effectively. Was that something that obviously you needed to show some of it for story purposes, but is that something that you really wanted to show more of and be more transparent of to illustrate that to people watching all over the world?
I guess that's to me. I would say at the start, I probably just wanted to show the archetypal battered woman as in a different way and not such a victim, that she's like brave in her own way, actually, even to be there in the first place in that situation, but then to choose to leave as well. And then as I began to write it and research, I realized, oh, this is sort of a battle on all fronts. It's not just on the home front. And it takes a lot for these women and men that are in these situations to get completely free of the relationship or whatever it's doing to them, and then to get to a new place in their lives. And there's a few places that you have to go through, obviously, like the housing association or the courts, the family courts and stuff. And to me, it was just important to not show a documentary and not be like, I'm not Ken Loach, I'm not just trying to do social realism. I'm also trying to show, I wonder what it could be like, or I wonder where it could go from there. So it's a fiction very much based in fact. And I just wanted to show actually really what these women do to get through all that. And a lot of my research was based on court transcripts and meeting family psychologists, meeting key workers that work with these women on the front line. And so it is, I suppose it is to me just important to show how sometimes things are wrong systemically, and that they're imbalanced and they're skewed a certain way, and that I want to question how we can improve that.
My favorite line in the movie, and I actually was talking to my colleague about it, who had the opportunity to see this at Sundance and told me that this was the line that got huge applause when he saw it there, was the line, "Ask better questions" in the courtroom. And it's just So true. Um, where did that come from? I just think it was cathartic for, I'm sure, for so many people. Talk to
Well,
me about that.
for me, it was just one of those great writing moments in my kitchen. And that's what it was at first. It was one of those things where that's exactly what I was trying to unpeel. I was like, how it's not about just writing people talking to each other in rooms in certain situations and researching them well. It's like when you're storytelling and you're on film and you're bringing people to see something, it's like, how do we take it to that next level? And I thought it's about questioning the very thing itself and getting right in there. And I remember writing that line and going, "Oh, that's it. That's how we get in on it." And at that moment in time, of course, I was just thinking of Sandra against that system and the judge and how they just don't hear her correctly or ask her the right questions. And then when we were in Sundance, it was quite a revelation to me actually that it was saying a lot more. It was saying a lot more about I don't know, journalism and how we narrate the stories in our worlds and how we ask people in certain positions, what do we ask them and how do we ask them, and are these questions being answered at all? And I didn't realize that's what that line was going to do until we got to Sundance.
It's quite the rallying cry. Fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, one of the things, because we did have quite a bit of conversation about it amongst my colleagues, and we really just adore this film, was when you're taking this film that is about abuse and how to survive abuse, the feel goodness of it and the empowerment of it is surprising. Like you just leave feeling with like a hug for them. Like you just hug them in such a wonderful way because you wish such positivity in their lives and you feel like you have your friend is doing so well. How were you able to really do that, accomplish that so well? Was that something that was, I mean, how? I'm just leaving it with how.
I'd say Philida would be able to answer it a bit more, but for me anyway, writing wise, it was just I was following direction of one of the first women I ever met in a women's aid charity shop, and I told her what I was doing, and she said, please tell the story that no one tells of the women that actually get through this, get to the other side, and they're absolute heroes, and they do prevail. So that was my direction right from the start. But Philid would be able to talk more about the kind of the tone and how we directed it then, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it did have this, the screenplay as I first saw it had this amazing shape, almost of a thriller, where, you know, she was striving, she was set back, she had hope, it was very kind of ingeniously constructed in that way. And I think that it came down to the fact that Claire she's sort of speaking on two fronts. One is she wants social change, as I do. We've both been on this kind of massive mission in our work in the theatre to give, you know, voices to women who are voiceless, and we want, you know, the world to wake up and understand that everyone has a right to a house. And how many of us, you know, in this time of the pandemic have felt what it is to feel the safety of a home, and that this is a human right. And we feel that, you know, governments have to wake up and understand that. On the other hand, you know, Claire's speaking to the individual woman who might be trapped, and thousands of women are trapped worse now than they ever have been in situations of domestic abuse, and saying to them, you know, there is hope if you take that step. And so it's speaking to the individual and to the society at large at the same time. And so it has that kind of, yeah, it's the light and dark in it. And I think the children, who are a really important part of the movie, they are the future, and they're the future that Sandra has created in them, this strength and resilience. And without giving any spoilers, I think they're a really, really important part of this journey.
Absolutely. And you talk about how this narrative of the thriller, which is so true. And I remember thinking at different parts, is it okay to feel hopeful? And I think you did such a great job with that. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the brilliant use of music. And I loved the way you intersperse music throughout this and your choice of music. I was wondering if you could talk to the students a little bit about that and what your choices were and how you made those choices.
I mean, one of the things, we did start off in the editing process in a very different place. I would say a much bleaker place, and a place that would have perhaps given the whole film, would have kept it perhaps in a sort of in a middle, a different band, a slightly narrower bandwidth, and the decision to explore kind of music coming from the building site, the world that Sandra was in. We started talking about Sandra's soundtrack, what was in Sandra's iPod. And, it was a mixture of kind of very indie Irish bands that were playing on Irish radio, and then kind of Irish classics that were in her DNA, and then some kind of blockbusters that just were things that, were like her anthems. So it sort of grew very much out of Sandra the character and what she was hearing around her.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, it's funny, it reminds me a little bit of like, having also done theater, this like theater troupe of family that you have around you, of these people that Sandra meets along her way and who become her family. And you were speaking of pandemic times, like roof over your head, people who become your family, these people who you kind of collect. So how did these, partially in the writing and partially in the way you shot it, how did you come up with these characters, and then how did you shoot to create this family that surrounds her?
At first it was just writing, obviously, the ensemble, but really I was writing the Dublin of today, which is very multicultural. And so I was kind of working off the palette of what I was seeing in life and observation, like just observing Dublin and the world around me. And then in the casting process, it was amazing because Phillida and Louise really went out of their way. Louise Kiley, who cast it, they just went out of their way to really find that ensemble. And by the time we came to being on set, we kind of, it felt almost documentary. Like it was like we were just doing stuff like on the site and building, and Phillida sort of just followed us in a way, and I think that helped create the sense of authentic ensemble and people that genuinely came together to help this woman, rather than 1 minute they're there, 1 minute they're not. It's like it was the gradual her asking them to help, etc., and coming on board. But I think it always had that feeling of just an organic growth, and each character has their own little moment in it then. But yeah, that definitely helped. That was definitely helped by Louise and Phillida in the casting.
And we come from the theatre, so we like rehearsing, and we knew we had to, in order to kind of use those lethal power tools, we knew, which we really were using, we knew the actors had to be trained to use them, and we wanted it to feel very authentic on the site. Claire and I had gone off and done a course in how to build a timber framed house, so we were like well in there with what it felt like to be in this group who were actually building this with their bare hands. But I think our theatre background is good. We're good at creating ensemble in a quick space of time, and sort of with a few key people like Harriet Walter and Conleth Hill around us, we were able to support, some of the more perhaps inexperienced members of the ensemble and kind of put them in an environment where they felt really safe to just be themselves, which was what it was about.
It's funny. I wondered about if you did you take a class to learn how to build this? Like, how it looks so realistic. Can you build a house now? Like, is this a skill you have for life? Talk to us a little bit about, because, I don't know if you know how much you know about the makeup of the students here, but the amount of classes that they take and there are so many who are doing cinematography and directing and acting and many of them who are learning makeup and ones who are learning set design. So tell us a little bit about what it was like working on site and what it was like to just be surrounded by all the many places where you were shooting. How did that play into what you were doing?
Okay, so the logistics of this, just for young filmmakers, normally on any movie you would have a location and you shoot out all the scenes you're doing on that location, because that's the logical way to use your time, and time is everything. But with this, we literally started off with a bare green field, and when Conleth came in with his digger and started scraping it, that was the first damage that was done to it. And then, because we then needed foundations, we had to rush off somewhere else and shoot other scenes. And then when we came back, it was like, oh, look, there are foundations. Mm-hmm. And as the house, our construction crew progressed the house, every time we came back, there was this amazing sort of gasp from the actors and the crew of, wow, look at it, and again, without giving any spoilers, there were other kinds of gasps, as we went through it. So it was a very particular, both logistical, but also kind of spiritual relationship to what was growing in front of us.
So we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I did want to ask you guys one more question for the students here. As people who have had the opportunity to work both in theater and in film, what advice would you give to the students who are here about working between that transition and how you're able to go through both? And obviously you have experience with writing and film and directing. I feel like you are a font of information for them. Just a general kind of first word of advice you would offer them.
Nothing is wasted in terms of life experience in actually building a career. I mean, nothing. And everything you do that's nothing to do with film is going to be treasure to put in the pot. Theatre is a brilliant training ground for movies in terms of teaching you about dramaturgy, about editing, because you are constantly, as a director anyway, editing where you want the audience to look on a stage using light and composition. Don't try and solve everything at once. The solution will come, but it might not come until the last inch.
Yeah. I'd say they're all great pieces of advice. I think I took them offer along the way. And I would say acting wise, it's like you're always looking for authenticity anyway. The only difference is in a theatre, you just do it louder. And make sure you're facing the right direction. There's a general rule of don't fall over furniture as well, but we'll leave that to the side. But if you're also just exploring storytelling on any level, find out what it is that makes you burn alive with passion and curiosity, because an idea that you have should nearly be waking you up in the morning. It has to keep you going as well. You know, don't be just thinking of what you want to sell. It's like, no, like what really truly interests you and sparks you, because that's what's going to spark other people and keep everyone then that's involved in the project will love doing that project. And also, if you are genuinely interested in something, it's usually because it has a million layers to unpeel. So you know you have a good one when you have one. It's because there's lots to find out.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but a big virtual round of applause for you both. And thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for everyone at home watching for your participation and for supporting the art forms that make movies, movie magic realities. So enjoy the rest of the SCAD Savannah Film Festival and watch from home. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.